I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Jack O'Meara. Um, Jack was recognised by the Global Undergraduate Awards as a highly commended student and also a regional winner from the island of Ireland back in 2016 in the engineering category. Jack has a Bachelor of Engineering from the National University of Ireland, Galway, as well as a Master's in Science from the University of Notre Dame. Jack O'Meara is co-founder and CEO at Ochre Bio, which is a genomics-based drug discovery company developing therapies to rejuvenate transplanted livers. He's a biomedical engineer by training with a background in bringing new healthcare and life sciences products to market. He helped to get one of the first blockbuster gene therapies through FDA and EMA approval. And Ochre Bio recently raised $9.6 million of seed funding from group venture capital firms led by Silicon Valley billionaire Vinod Khosla. So, Jack, I'd like to introduce you now, and hopefully we'll be able to see you on screen very shortly.
Hello, everyone from different parts of the world. I am very glad to be speaking with you all, perhaps a minute or two late. I don't know if you got the introduction to how I ended up on this screen in front of you today, but Jim, who I'm sure just gave a fabulous introduction to the set of talks we're about to get into, bumped into me in a kebab shop in the middle of London, and I recognized him because I remember when I was in your shoes 5 or 6 years ago and getting the award, and Jim gave this very inspiring speech about about careers and about life and about the importance of folks just like you who go out and actually try and make a big impact on the world. And I actually remember a lot of that speech quite vividly. But when I saw him, I hadn't seen him since then. So this is 6 years later, and I said to myself, well, I really should just go up and approach the guy and see if it is actually the same person I remember talking many moons ago. And lo and behold, it was. And lo and behold, he talked to me. And then, of course, he invites me to do this. He just didn't expect that I would have such bad internet. Anyway, I decided, for the sake of this talk, that what would be most useful. I tried to put myself back in your guys' shoes 6 years ago when you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. You got a lot of ambition, you got a lot of energy, you got a lot of mission driven, want to see some impact in the world. At least that's where I was at the time. And I thought to myself, what would be most useful for me if I was in those shoes? And I thought it'd be interesting to see what type of weird career trajectories that people like Jim or like myself or others who've gone on a couple of years ahead of you have taken, and how that's landed them to where they are today. Because I think oftentimes it's sometimes the more unusual trajectories or journeys that can be the most interesting. So why don't I share a little bit about my journey and give you a bit about my background, what I'm up to. I'm an entrepreneur in the biotech field with a keen interest in liver. My company is called Ochre Bio, as you can see here, and I will walk you through a little bit about what we get up to and what we're all about. So I put together a few slides, and I will try and get through them quite quickly. I know I've got 15 minutes left, and I would love for folks to jump in and Q&A, and I'm not sure if the platform will allow you to do that. It certainly didn't like me at the beginning, so maybe that won't be the case. But I'll go through the slides, and if there's any questions at the end, very happy to kind of just make this as conversational as possible. So the structure of today's the talk is really about career plans and how does that shape what you ultimately, giving you a view of how I ended up doing what I'm doing, which is starting a biotech company in liver. I'll give you a bit about my journey, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I do in the liver drug development space, and then I'll talk a little bit about healthcare more generally, because I think it is a really amazing field, particularly at this point when there's tons of innovation in the space, and it's just a very impactful space to dedicate one's life towards. So I'll give it a little bit of a commentary on that at the end. But anyway, career plan. How do you decide what one needs to do post something like the undergraduate awards? You folks have obviously demonstrated your academic prowess alongside, I'm sure, all of your other many skills that you can go and bequeath upon the world. What's the word? I clearly didn't do very well, and I clearly wasn't an English literature major, but it's a difficult one. I don't think anyone really has a very clear idea of what they want to do right after undergrad. And I didn't. I think some people probably do, but I definitely didn't. And I knew kind of a vague framework for what I wanted to help use to try and inform the decisions that I would make on my career journey. And I didn't really have them articulated very clearly, but in preparation for this talk, I reflected a little bit on what those driving forces for me were, and the very simple language I came up to describe them. And sorry, this is a little bit Irish centric, being an Irish man, but the first one is optimize for learning. I think, like most of you folks, I am very hungry to fill my sponge-like brain with as much interesting insights into how the world works as much as possible. And so that was definitely a key focus for me as I was setting out postgraduates or post my studies. The other thing is I'm always keen for a challenge. And again, I think we'll probably share this in common as well, in that I don't want to do something that I'm going to find, I'll get into a routine and I'll master it. I want to be constantly pushed and challenged to go out and kind of achieve as much as I possibly can with my potential. The last one, this is a very Irish one, but crack. I'm very particularly au fait with crack. Crack meaning fun in an Irish sense, fun or social energy or just a lot of excitement. I'm a little bit magpie-ish in that respect. I have to criticize myself. And then the last one, which is kind of the underbearing of all of those, is something that is meaningful for the world more generally and society. So that was a key decision criteria for me as well. So anyway, with this vague framework, I tried to go out and go forth into the world and see what was the right path for me. So this is a very poor graphic that tries to illustrate how I ended up to where I am today. You'll recognize maybe that logo in the top right hand corner as the one that represents the company that I helped to get off the ground, called Ochre Bio. But how did all of these kind of weird experiences really since UA, so in the last 6 years, how did they get me there, and what were the things I learned along the journey from there? So I was a biomedical engineering undergraduate in Galway, on the bottom left. And again, with this framework of how do I maximize learning, how do I maximize good impact in the world, and with a little bit of fun along the way, some of the decisions I made that ultimately get me to here were initially to go to the US. So the first thing I did post graduating from the University of Ireland, was looking across the Atlantic to where a lot of the innovation or interests in the biomedical space, which is my expertise, a lot of that innovation comes from the US. So I knew I wanted to get across there and try and get a bit of exposure to that side of the world. So I landed in the US. I did a very quick graduate degree focused on innovation or entrepreneurship in the healthcare sphere, and in doing so started my first venture, which was called Venture for Ireland, which was essentially an attempt to give folks from this side of the world exposure to the entrepreneurial and industriousness of the US. So set up a fellowship program, an entrepreneurial training program, but it didn't go anywhere. We ran out of money quite quickly. Problem with a non-profit is you don't have that business model to really kick you into gear sometimes. So we ran out of cash, and I went back and I was looking for my next gig, and I ended up in consulting, as is not uncommon for folks with an entrepreneurial bent to spend a few years in consulting. And the reason that the line that I've drawn here goes up and down during that period is because I learned a lot, which is great. I wore a suit a lot, which was not so great. But I also learned a lot of things I had to unlearn after I left consulting. In that there is a lot of norms to management consultants. There's a big business that are probably counterproductive to just getting stuff done. A lot of formalities or bureaucracies that can be a little bit frustrating. But on that journey, I did learn a lot. I got a lot of exposure to a multitude of big companies, which was an interesting process to go through, and definitely allowed me to see how the guys do it at the top, or what it looks like when you got a much larger organization. But really, I knew, I guess, in my heart of hearts, that my style or my personality was probably better suited to the beginning and starting stuff from scratch, and that blank sheet of paper feeling when you're going out and kind of creating something from nothing. That was kind of the best fit for me personally. So post that stint in consulting, I moved over and started working in biotech specifically. So I did a variety of different roles in healthcare, from digital health to health insurance to med tech. And then I eventually settled on biotech as a space where I thought my skills were most useful, and that you got an early stage innovation in the healthcare sphere. What do you need to do to take that scientific breakthrough all the way through to actual patient impact and to making a real impact in people's lives? And so that was, for me, initially a company called Avexis, which you probably never heard of, but it was a small little gene therapy company out of the outskirts of Chicago. It was the first gene therapy product to get to market. So a really fascinating experience and really breaking ground for a new wave of medicine that can have a tremendous amount of impact on patient lives. So very inspirational journey. We're working on a product that ultimately was used to treat a severe genetic disease that affected kids. So it was a life-saving treatment for children, which, again, going back to that concept of impact, I don't think there are many more things that are as highly leveraged as working on therapeutics that can ultimately save a ton of lives. So again, I'm kind of shouting for the biotech healthcare realms today. So that's my plug for that. And then I did a short stint in Novartis, and you'll see that kind of learning curve going a little bit down. I criticize big companies. Big companies teach you a lot, but they also teach you a lot of less, a lot of formalities that may not be as helpful as they sometimes are, particularly if you're interested in the early stage company space. And then after having done this kind of weird and meandering journey of time and maximizing learnings, I decided to jump headfirst into the entrepreneurship world and started a company called Ochre Bio. And some of the lessons learned thus far, I guess, if I had to think about things at a high level, what would I bestow upon you folks as you're going out to set yourselves up for a career? If you are a little like me, with probably too much energy and a whole lot of ambition, early stage companies are a really fascinating place to at least spend some of your career. I mean, I'm not advocating to spend your life there, but for some period of your career, you just have a very steep growth trajectory, a very steep learning curve, because you ultimately have to wear many hats, because there isn't very well defined silos like you'll find in much larger companies. And good and bad, I do think big companies serve a great learning experience as well. But I think if you want to see a lot of how everything works, and you're like me, really needs to understand everything and is focused on trying to get your head around everything, it's a really interesting place to begin your journey, or at least spend some part of your journey. The second thing is, it's a small world and life is long. So Jim, as an example, I don't even think I talked to him at the undergraduate awards. Maybe I should have a brief hello to him, but I recognized him and I approached him in a kebab shop in the middle of London. And life is long. So and I got a great connection out of him. He's introduced me to a local football team that I might join in London. And those small connections along the way can really unlock tremendous value, or can really be impactful for your career and ultimately your personal life as well as you go along the way. So don't burn bridges, I guess, is the message there, and keep an eye out on people. And the folks that you're virtually meeting over this week, I think you should make a great impact or great effort to keep them in your lives, because I've done the same and actually have some friends that I met that weekend I still speak with. And biology, my shout out for today, of course, I'm waving the banner here of healthcare, but biotech and biology as a concept just provides for this incredibly deep and rich area to study and to learn from, and then ultimately with tremendous impact for society and human health. And I think if you are impact driven, it's an interesting area that matches both your intellectual curiosities that you may have with the desire to do good in the world. So I'll leave you with that thought. Again, my sales pitch is over. And I realize we're burning on time, so I'll try. I won't spend too much time on this. I just want to give a brief background on what we do at Ochre Bio, and I've shared my somewhat meandering thoughts on career trajectory. But Ochre Bio, we're a medicines company with a focus on chronic liver disease and cardiometabolic diseases. It's a top 10 global killer, very underserved medical need. There are no treatments available for late stage liver disease, and it's the only top 10 global killer that's currently on the rise. So what we have done in thinking about this challenge and trying to innovate within the drug discovery space is, because a lot of therapeutic development has traditionally been done in mice models and monkey models, which aren't typically very representative of human biology. A mouse and a mouse liver and a human liver are very different. As a result, you'll often see a lot of big, expensive clinical trial failures for therapies trying to make a big impact in this space. So the way we've tried to rethink that is by partnering with transplant centers to take discarded donor livers, so livers that actually can't be used for transplant because they have too much disease, or livers that have just come out from a diseased patient, and use them as a model to study the therapies that we develop by keeping them alive in this system that I'm showing you here. It's quite gory, forgive me. And that's where I'm calling in from today. I'm at one of our transplant sites, hence all of the many academic papers strewn behind me here. Anyway, we're developing therapies that we think can really make an impact in chronic liver disease space and rethinking how one might do drug discovery in that. And again, it's not biomedical engineering like I first started out. Maybe there's a lesson in here somewhere in that I learned a lot about biomedical engineering and medical devices and so on and so forth. But all of that learning is translatable across sector, across different areas of the industry. And I'm now very much focused on the biology and finding new engineering tricks that can ultimately uncover new ways to study and basically treat biology. And as an example, and I'll stop talking now because I'm almost at time. This is one of the things that we do. We do a lot of sequencing of human tissue to try and find new pathways and new therapeutics that could ultimately improve the disease we're trying to treat. And here are 2 images of liver tissue that we've taken, and we use an imaging AI tool to basically algorithmically identify regions of particular disease niches. And I'm probably going a bit too technical here, but essentially we're finding areas of tissue that is more diseased than area that right next to healthy tissue, and asking the question, what's changing as liver disease begins to take flight or begins to take hold of patients at these particular disease regions, and then comparing that at a genetic level by using sequencing and a lot of these new technologies to really study disease and come up with new potential therapeutics. So point being, a lot of new technology coming into drug discovery that's helping us think differently about how to solve these important problems. Anyway, last slide. Again, my waving the banner for biotech, but one of the big VC funds called Andreessen Horowitz out in California in early 2000s said technology is eating or software is eating the world. And recently I've just been quoted as saying bio is eating the world. That is to say, the next decade will be a really exciting time to be in the healthcare industry. And I think it's a place where you can make a lot of difference. So I'd love to see more folks with great minds like yourselves enter into it. And I will stop talking, but it's been lovely speaking with you today.
Thanks a million, Jack. No, it was really interesting to hear your career journey so far, and I think for most of our audience, warning them of the sort of meandering path that will lead them down the career eventually is great bit of advice. So we do have a question or 2 coming in, if you don't mind, Jack. So the first
Absolutely.
one there is, was there anything in particular that you learned through your experience with the undergraduate awards that was helpful in your subsequent career journey?
Great question. I guess one of the things that's been a constant theme throughout those little jumps between random places was the relationships you build along the way. I think almost all of my jobs at some way or another came from someone that I've been introduced to, or someone I'd met at somewhere else. And I think that is an important lesson when you're starting out, is the power of people. I'm sure you probably heard this already today, but the power of casual relationships to really tie the world together and open up doors that you maybe didn't see there. So I think that's definitely something that started with the undergraduate awards. And I still, as I said, I moved to Pittsburgh for one of those little logos for a while. And one of my closest friends while I was living there was someone I'd met years prior at the undergraduate awards. So,
Okay.
Try and keep those relationships warm.
Definitely, yeah. No, we heard a bit of that yesterday, particularly talking about networks and the value of the network, and particularly UA. We had face to face yesterday for the first time in 2 years. So we had about 30 people or so gather here in Dublin. So it was great to be able to share, and people connecting was lovely to see. So. Great. Okay, Jack. I'll thanks for your time and for sharing the story about meeting Jim in the kebab shop, and that was really interesting. So we're going to move on now and hear from some of our global winners. So thanks again, Jack.
No problem. And sorry for the technical issues. Thanks, guys. And if anyone has any questions or want to reach out, I'm very available online, social media or whatnot. So take care.
Thanks a million.